the world seems to be putting us in a situation that says, well, here's this ingenious thing I came up with. It's going to stop you flying, growing, and globalizing. One of the bedrocks of our understanding of the way the globalized world works, the free movement of people, I don't see that coming back. And I effectively don't see it coming back ever. Will all people go back to the Irish bars? Or squashed up against one another in these wonderful, happy, sweaty places, drinking pints of Guinness and listening to rebel songs? Will they? Will businessmen jump on a flight, to Wuhan to try and sell some more BMWs to the Chinese billionaires? Will that happen? What does this mean for world trade? And the thing that strikes me is that this doesn't need any human intervention or any ingenuity or any plan. This is simply how it's going to unfold. People are going to find themselves restricted, localized, changed.
I'm speaking today with John Doyle, my good friend from Brussels, originally from Ireland. And John, I like to say that you work with the EU Commission in Brussels. You work for them for 20 years, yeah, or more. Mm-hmm. You're a lifer.
Yeah.
And but the opinions that you express and the statements that you make are your own, and they don't represent official opinions of the EU.
Correct. And in fact, it's one of the great things about the EU and the European Commission as well, that it's also primarily probably a generator of ideas. Its primary and first function is to come up with ideas, to take initiative for the benefit of European citizens, which is, both a joy and a privilege and a responsibility. But it's actually the thing that makes the European Union unique. I'm probably particularly lucky in that I work a lot on foresight, which gives us the chance to work outside normal strictures. But yeah, as I say, I'm proud to be an employee of the European Commission, but these views and my are mine.
And they sometimes kind of get you in hot water. Of course, we're all in hot water, but...
Well, in the sense that, as I said, the European Commission ceases to exist when ideas cease to bubble up. And one of my favourite bosses, an eminent Director General, famously told me, and this is a spirit that runs right through the Commission, he said, it's always better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Yeah. So there's a spirit of that runs through the Commission, a courageous will to take initiative, because this is our duty, our obligation, our right, and our honour to be that part of the system that takes the initiative, which is then adopted or not by the Parliament and the Member States. So the right of initiative and the spirit of taking initiative and thinking independently is a very core part of what the European Commission does.
Great. It's not just simply rubber stamping things.
No, and as I say, it is a public sector organisation, sound and efficient management, guardian of the treaties, all that good stuff. But it is unique, I think, in the history of all public sector organisations worldwide in having this special remit to sit down, think about stuff, and come up with ideas that might ultimately be translated into legislation or specific actions. And that introduces a natural tension. That creative tension is good. And as I say, one has to work within certain strictures most of the time, but one is also hugely liberated to think freely. We all walk a line in our work, but the Commission is a particularly good place for people who want to bring the creative and new to apparently intractable problems. The Germans and the French going to war every 50 years for about 300 years. How do you stop that? Yeah. Okay, you set something up where somebody comes up with generally very concrete ideas. How do we nationalise the things they keep fighting over? Nationalise is the wrong word, but how do we make common what they keep fighting over? Coal, steel, land. Okay. If these things were kind of in some way a shared responsibility, maybe they wouldn't fight each other all the time. So yeah. It's both idealistic and very concrete.
Could you used one word before that you and I know has a special meaning, but we need to elaborate on that a moment. Or you used the word foresight. Now it's an ordinary language member of the word in the English language, but it has a special meaning in the context that you used it. Please explain to us what foresight means.
Well, I can tell you what it means to me. My good friend who runs the Foresight Network within the Commission, Nicholas, would probably disagree with me. But for me, it's a question of having people of various expertise and various interests consider problems that are likely to emerge. People people often think that foresight is something to do with predicting, I don't know what color hair robots will have in 50 years, but it's really not that at all. It's a question of providing original and unfettered intellectual insights into how things are unfolding, or could unfold, or will unfold. I mean, we often, currently, because we're doing quite a bit of work thinking obviously around our existing challenges, we often try and remove the notion of future from foresight. So I would almost call it insight. It's, okay, what's really happening? You know, we know technically what's happening, and we think we understand that governments have to bail something out, but what's really happening? So that tends to be the thrust of the work, and funnily enough, it's always as much a learning curve for the practitioners as it is kind of an output for policymakers.
Now, still, let me get to the kernel of what I didn't hear you say. That
okay,
Foresight is a group. It's a distinct group of individuals who work within the EU Commission. Perhaps, in addition, some who are outside of it, but to gather together to. And nowadays you don't gather together so easily, but you work together, you think together, you communicate as a group.
Correct, and there are several. In fact, this new commission has decided to mainstream foresight into all policy making at all levels, which is really interesting. Foresight has tended to be, so there will be foresight activities across all the services. So whether it's dealing with research or agriculture or fisheries or strategies for transport, all of our commission services contain a foresight element, and those foresight groups can work quite independently on foresight for the specific area, but then they always then meet in a network of to exchange these ideas and see how foresight, both the specific insights for their field and the broader insights that we might generate through contracts and so on and so forth, might better inform the overall thrust of policy. Furthermore, what the European Parliament and the Council also conducted their own foresight activities. So it's one of the things I often quote a lady called Anne Nettler, who was part of the previous commission. ESPAS, which was the European kind of assemblage of foresight actors within the three institutions, produced the report where they explicitly, and for the first time, and something I mentioned when I replaced you in Geneva, explicitly and for the first time mentioned that humanity was facing an explicit existential crisis, that if we didn't turn this around in a big hurry, there was a measurable and not insignificant chance that our species was going over the brink. Now, this made quite a splash, headline-wide, worldwide. So, as I say, the notion of foresight is really, it's almost a safe space to think, and therefore attracts all sorts.
Good. Thank you. I wanted to clarify that because I hold the group, the foresight group, in great honor. For what it is. I don't think there's anything comparable in the United States except what's private, in the military or the intelligence community. But you have a public intelligence organization out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Public intelligence is a pretty good way of putting it. I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Now, I asked you if you'd join me on this call specifically because you sent out, and it was an email that I went, whoa. So this is the email that John sent me. Dear Stuart, the following struck me in the context of foresight deliberations here in Brussels. Reflection with the Inter-Director General Foresight and Climate Change groups on the end of normal. A. The COVID crises might not, probably will not end, at least on a century's timescale. Whoa. COVID 2, 3, et al. Will come along, forcing humans to reestablish a more normal place in the interconnected web of life, or, quite possibly, go extinct. This evolution is no longer even nominally under human control. Accelerating incidences of novel SARS-type virus and our inability to exercise control will lead to a shrinking and more localized world. International travel will remain very risky for generations. Globalized trade in goods the same. Localization will be the emerging new normal. Again, force of circumstances. And the regeneration of natural biodiverse barriers between humankind and our so-called viral enemies will occur naturally as we retreat in number and physical disbursement. Next, a new dietary regime is inevitable as the only, for decades, defense against our niche competitors / parasites. Money / debt
economic models are already clearly obsolete and will be utterly forgotten within 10 to 15 years. The new mechanism for ensuring we produce what we need and want is emerging, though should also provide fruitful ground for speculation for the many redundant economists who will be available for consultation, their labors in the fields being furnished to the satisfaction of their overseers. Yeah, will still be rich people gaming the system. We will make no more German cars. In short, planning in Northern Europe for this summer's temperature extremes will be addressed, as the loss of 20% plus of atmospheric particulate matter will drive many Northern European cities, especially into dangerous wet bulb temperature extremes. I expect this line of inquiry to be largely informed by the irresistible unfolding of events. It will certainly not be driven by ideas nor words.
So I wanted to discuss that today, if you would. And
I spend a lot of time thinking about, obviously thinking about all this stuff. So, in totally understandable fashion, the Commission, not unlike your own government, is desperately trying to keep things going for the time being. So, I mean, the first thing everybody does is try to put some money in the people's pockets, because countless millions of jobs in developed economies are now on furlough. So how do people keep going? How does the economy keep going? Now, I would do precisely the same thing were I in the White House or were I in government offices in Ireland or any other countries. Somehow you've got to keep the thing ticking over. My opinion, however, is that we keep everything ticking over just long enough for the realization to begin to set in that it never goes back. In fact, it never assumes any semblance of what we would have come to accept as being normal. Now, this seems obvious to somebody who works in the foresight domain. So, for example, we have loads of excellent experts around who are interested in the whole SARS and the emergence of these novel strains of coronavirus viruses. It is extremely unlikely that this is the last of these viruses. So even are we to entirely master it and come up with a miracle vaccine and so on and so forth, what about next year's one? What about the one after that? What about all the other ones that come? Now, this is a very powerful thing to have to come to terms with. There is no vaccine, there is no cure. I had never seen this coming. For me, one of the things that was in the back of my mind, I used to worry a little bit about antibacterial resistance and so on and so forth. But the fact that a virus could be the mechanism whereby Gaia, to use a famous term, Lovelock's term, whereby Gaia suddenly decides to right this particular ship, had never crossed my mind. So think just for a moment about there never being an end of COVID, or COVID 2 or 3 or 4 being something completely different and even more terrible. Let's imagine COVID 3 in 4 years' time is something that attacks the kidneys, and everyone's running around looking for dialysis machines rather than respirators. So you suddenly are faced with the stark reality that even if I had the best job opportunity in the world tomorrow, would I fly to New Orleans? Would I take a job in Wuhan? Would they let me go to Mexico City? So you suddenly say, one of the bedrocks of our understanding of the way the globalized world works, the free movement of people, I don't see that coming back. And I effectively don't see it coming back ever. Now, I say ever in terms of, reasonable timescales, a couple of centuries, or decades at least. When we have discussed previously at great length, what the world needs to do to get itself off fossil fuels, there was this kind of delusion of human agency. That you and I and so many other people honestly thought if we could just tell the truth so that everybody understands, everybody would do the right thing. And there's the wonderful thing about COVID, it's a wonderful thing, it's a dreadful thing.
I permit you that rhetoric because a lot of people are saying there's a very leaning silver lining to this.
Yeah. But the extraordinary thing about it is now this decision making is taken out of our hands. So COVID is still, let's say in 6 months' time, we've gotten over some sort of a peak. We're worried that there might be another one, a la the Spanish flu in 2019, 2020. Will all the people go back to the Irish bars? Squashed up against one another in these wonderful, happy, sweaty places, drinking pints of Guinness and listening to rebel songs? Will they? Will businessmen jump on a flight, to Wuhan to try and sell some more BMWs to the Chinese billionaires? Will that happen? What does this mean for world trade? And the thing that strikes me is that this doesn't need any human intervention or any ingenuity or any plan. This is simply how it's going to unfold. People are going to find themselves restricted, localized, changed. And the other thing that this does then is wonderfully allow the natural systems perhaps to recover, naturally restoring those biodiverse barriers and in distinct ecosystems, which keep the whole system from being interconnected in a very sterile and, we now realize, hugely vulnerable way. Because there's no magic bullet for this. There's no magic vaccine. There's no iPhone app that gets rid of this. What has to happen is a strangely renegotiated place on this planet. I'm not entirely sure we can do it. If I was a betting man, I'd still say we won't be here in 20 years. However, given that the planet is now implementing almost word for word Greta Thunberg's proposals in terms of emissions reductions and so on and so forth, maybe we have a chance.
Well, that's a debate for another day. But no, seriously. But I want to go a little bit further down the path that you've started us on, which is not only will things probably not go back to the way they were, cannot go back to the way they were in terms of our economic view of human reality.
Yeah,
I'm famous for poking holes and saying what we call economics is a particular brand, a particular model called neoclassical growth economics. We may not be able to go back to growth. We hopefully will not be able to go back to growth. So what we need, I believe, at this moment, is we need people at the EU Commission and other places. I won't say Washington, D.C., because we know that's owned right now by a kleptocrat. But we need to get some kind of way of distributing goods and services and keeping people alive, albeit not necessarily at a luxurious, privileged, everybody wants the great American dream kind of level. But we need
the great European dream. I'm pretty comfortable too.
The meme is the great American dream over here. But
I know.
Okay, but not only won't we be able to get back to that, is we shouldn't even be aiming for it. So it's your job and my job to say, hey guys, there's another way, a la ecological economics, Herman Daly, Kate Raworth, and I am looking forward to viewing and publishing their talk.
Yeah, it's great. It's good. I would go a little bit further. I find myself, and I mean, we both also have an interest in philosophies, both Eastern and Western. But I suppose, in particular, what's striking about this is almost it almost has a Taoist feel to it. We have clearly lost our way. Now we've known we've lost our way. It's very hard not to know you've lost your way when a 16-year-old child will be a far better person to have in charge of a country than the 74-year-old man-child for whom, strangely, I feel nothing but pity. You know, God almighty, he must be so sad. Anyway, but you know there's something seriously wrong with the world. It must have been the same feeling those brave centurions used to have when Nero was kind of at his worst in Rome. They must have been looking around and saying, there's something wrong with this, guys. This can't last if this is the guy taking the decision. So, and it's not just that. We can see our ecosystems collapsing around us. The barrier reefs, our food systems, the shift in the polar vortex. We know we're in deep, deep, deep trouble. And one of the things that I find interesting about this is it doesn't matter how much you know it. We don't seem capable of acting on it. And that's fascinating. So that's kind of the addict's lament. And what's interesting to me is we have never really had agency, in my opinion. We haven't had the humility to understand our place in the universe and surf along and have a good time. But it's now patently obvious that we don't have agency. And curiously enough, the world seems to be putting us in a situation that says, well, here's this ingenious thing I came up with. It's going to stop you flying, growing, and globalizing. Now, if I had to come up with a plan for saving the planet, that pretty much would have been it. Now, I don't want to anthropomorphize planet Earth, but wow, that gives us a fighting chance.
In terms of our agency or lack thereof,
yes,
our illusion that we were in control,
yes,
the way I constitute it, and it's obviously just one way of putting it, is that we've had the cart before the horse for a long time, thinking that we controlled money and the economy. But in fact, my thesis, which kind of got me on the road to being heard when I presented this at the climate talks in Lima in 2014. My point was that money, capital M, is a thing, a virus, a meme. It's a the thought form. It's not the stuff in your pocket predominantly. It's all of the instructions by which we operate, and money operates us for its own reproductive purposes. I mean, when you said bail out, that's not the right term, because what it means is that the nations are going to their private central banks. The central banks are not part of the nation; they're private, and they're saying,
the States for sure.
except for maybe one or two countries. I mean, Deutsche Bank. So they're going to their banks and saying, we got to print more money. We got to try to jumpstart this engine again. And that means put more money out there, and then we know human frailties, what they are. Most of the money will go into corporate CEO pay, and very little of it will trickle down. And they'll give a check to, a little bit of money, so everybody feels like, they've gotten something out of this $2 trillion bailout in the United States. But it's money reproducing itself across humanity. And money only has the program of consuming resources to make more money. Money doesn't think, but it uses our thinking capacity. But money is in control, and this is
I think one of the things that I'm enjoying at the moment, and my boss, to be fair to him, at one stage sort of said to me, maybe in some of these emails you could stop with the kind of, I'm on this wonderful spiritual retreat thing, because we are in lockdown and it is hard and it's difficult for people, and we're very privileged. I'm privileged to live in a nice house where I can lock down. My kids and my wife are upstairs, eating or watching the TV, and I have a little room that I can. So I get it that the sort of vanity of sort of saying, wow, isn't this cool? You can actually see the world go by. Does not apply to so many people. Nevertheless, I want to make the point that even the effort that you're making, and the effort that Herman Daly was making in earlier talks to sort of understand and grasp the principles and so on and so forth, I suspect we're just going to be able to let all that go. That it doesn't really matter. There's this wonderful notion of that the travelers in the forest, like they come to a river and they make a raft that gets them across the river. But when they get to the other side of the river, you don't carry the raft on your back. You leave the raft and you carry on with your journey. Who knows what you'll need for the next challenge? Maybe it'll be climbing boots. So what's interesting me at the moment is the sudden realization on the part of so many people, like, who's important around here? Okay, so for some people, we obviously, being sort of whole food, plant-based eaters, kind of do most of our own cooking or whatever. But people are saying, wow, I couldn't do it without those Uber delivery guys. They're great. And they come to people's doors all the time, They matter. I'm just taking a crazy example as distinct from the usual nurse and doctor kind of stuff. Like, who actually matters now? What do we need? So Belgium is a country of about 11 million people. Okay, it's kind of ticking over. Now, we've got to make sure everybody has some money in the bank. Hats off to the Belgian government. That's one of the first things they're doing, putting about 1,500 euros in everybody's bank account, who's made unemployment, for the duration. And then the question becomes, so what's the duration? And what exactly are you putting in people's bank accounts? Because we all know that fiat currency is made. It's made against the promise of future growth. Now, very soon, everyone's going to realize there ain't no future growth. So what am I doing? And what do I need to keep doing? And what's being done for me? Heat, shelter, some reasonable food, and internet's good. And I'd like to keep the sewers running. That's about it. So a question I keep asking people is, how many thousands of tons of Irish steaks do people need to consume to defeat the coronavirus? I think none. How many German cars do we need to make to defeat the coronavirus? Again, my sneaking feeling is we don't need to make any more German cars, but we do need to get to the far side of this. So the most basic tenets fall away. I don't much feel like referring to things like economies and progress. It's kind of over. So what's here now?
kind of feels like the earth just sent us all to our rooms to think about what we've done.
Before coronavirus, you know my position, that everybody kind of knows what they have to do. 7% reduction in emissions year on year on year. We've got 20 years to get these down to blah, blah, blah. There wasn't a snowball's chance in hell of that ever happening. And it didn't matter how many cops we had. Let's grow our potatoes in the back garden. Let's start, if you need a car, well, we can car share. I mean, all of a sudden, it's different. Like right now, you can feel the difference. People are helping one another. That old person over there, can they get to the supermarket? Let's just give them a call and see. And suddenly it's different. Every evening here at 8 o'clock, we open the windows in the evening and we clap our hands raw for the medical staff and for the people who are trying to keep things going. So we were asked, in a broad context to reflect on what we can do. And I have very specific work that I do within the Commission. And I was able to give my inputs on those things. But as somebody with an obligation, a right, a duty to use my capacities to think about the big picture issues, it struck me that what I needed to also do, particularly in the context of our foresight work, was to raise the big issues. So I guess what I've raised here are these big issues. As we look towards piecemeal survival, day in, day out, that's good. But we also need to begin to feel the really profound change. So what I have suggested to the groups that I work with is that we begin a reflection, inter-DG foresight, climate change groups, all the kind of ideas stuff that's going on in the EU at the moment. We begin a reflection on the end of normal. And I made a couple of very rapid points. I said, one, the COVID crisis might not, in fact, probably will not end, at least on a century's timescale. COVID 2, 3, and so on and so forth will come along, forcing humans to re-establish a more normal place in the interconnected web of life. Or we might quite possibly go extinct. There's no short-term cure for this. This evolution is no longer even nominally under human control. That's the big revelation to me as I sit here in isolation. Accelerating incidences of novel SARS-type viruses and our inability to exercise control will lead, inevitably, to a shrinking and more localized world. International travel, just as one example, will remain very risky for generations. Globalized trade in goods, the same. Localization will be the emerging new normal. Again, force of circumstances. And the regeneration of natural biodiverse barriers between humankind and our so-called viral enemies will also occur naturally as we retreat in number and physical disbursement. I would suggest a new dietary regime is utterly inevitable. I would suggest that as the only, at least for decades to come, defense that there is against our niche competitor / parasite, this particular virus and other viruses, the only real way to combat this virus is for people to be extraordinarily healthy. The only way for people to be extraordinarily healthy is to stop the ridiculous, animal products-based diet that has been one of the primary contributors to the destruction of our planet to date.
Heavy meat consumption, heavy sugar consumption, heavy processed food,
dairy, fish, all that kind of stuff. Human beings should be eating a plant-based whole food diet largely composed of starches. Dr. Neil Bernard, the famous China study, and so on and so forth. We've known this for centuries, but it might actually happen this time because there's no stopping getting the virus. But if your resistance and your immunity is strong, you might not get it. But if you get it and you have strong resistance and immunity, you have a better chance of survival. And we're probably all pretty much going to get it, or its first cousin, or its son or daughter within the next few years. So human beings who do not eat these carcinogenic, debilitating diets don't have underlying issues, manage to survive. So I think it's something that's going to happen. You don't need to make veganism popular anymore. People just don't want to die in hospitals. I would suggest as well that money and debt economic models are already clearly obsolete. I mean, how many times do you bail out banks and massive big companies? I mean, they're clearly obsolete. I go further, I would suggest that they would be utterly incomprehensible to most people within 10 to 15 years. People will wonder what this thing called an economy was. One of my favourite questions to people at the moment is, what's an economy? Like, what is an economy? Will somebody tell me what an economy is? I said, the new mechanism for ensuring we produce what we need and want is emerging. I don't understand how it's emerging, but it's all around me at the moment. Mm-hmm. Big parts of it are the smiles and knowing looks of my neighbours and people as we get up half an hour outdoors walking dogs or whatever. Although I would like to...
Before you go on, the one I love is the video I was sent of Pedrito playing the theme of the Titanic movie on his balcony, and all the other balconies around him in Barcelona were either playing on instruments or singing or.
Yeah. I mean, this is very fundamental re-engineering. I mean, you spoke earlier of money, and I love it. For me, one of the great philosophers of the 20th century was a man called Alan Watts, who I'm sure you know well.
Yeah.
And but Alan has a wonderful piece where he talks about money, the confusion between money and wealth. Like wealth is having stuff, doing stuff. Money is something that we use that kind of can approximate to, or can in some circumstances facilitate. But he makes this wonderful joke where he suggests that human beings can't go on without the money-based economy, is roughly the equivalent of sort of the head of a building site sending his workers home one day because he's run out of inches or run out of centimeters. Sorry, we've no more inches today, we can't carry on building. What? It's a metric. It's an entirely artificial human construct. That has had its uses. But what follows? What follows is the big question.
Let me go back to the email. Okay, so the new mechanism for ensuring we produce what we need and want is emerging. Go on.
Again, this is me just being a smart ass. I mean, it's emerging on its own, though it should also provide fruitful ground for speculation for the many redundant economists who will be available for consultation once their labours in the fields are finished to the satisfaction of those who oversee them. I just want to see every economist in the world with a shovel in his hand digging potatoes, or scooping up horse poop to put on the carrots, I mean,
talking about something real and not about this hypothetical invisible hand of the marketplace.
Here in Brussels, where I am now, the crazy stuff is beginning to fade away. It's beginning to seem ghostly. What's real is standing on the balcony and clapping for those workers. What's also real is very unpleasant people, for example, throwing healthcare workers out as a co-location arrangements because they're scared they're going to bring the virus. But by and large, as somebody has written recently, it's not like the horror movies. People haven't turned into zombies and aren't kind of drilling through people's brains to suck their juices out. It seems like people are kind of feeling the pulse of their connectedness, not only to one another, but to what is, and say invisible hands and econometric theory. And actually, I'd just like some nice food to eat. I'd like the heat to stay on, and I'd like to be looked after. Is that okay?
So aside from all of these redundant neoclassical economists, ecological economists will not be redundant. They will be needed. But that's my view. Okay, so then you say, in F, we will be making no more German cars, nor Japanese cars, nor... Right.
Well, again, it's the example that we spoke about earlier. Like we knew we had this seriously wrong. Well, one of my favorite things is looking at the statistics on things like cars. I like to give the Germans a hard time. I like to give the Irish and the French a hard time about slaughtering tortured animals at the end of their miserable lives as well. But cars I love at the moment, because in most wealthy European countries we now have 1.5 cars per family. I mean, how many more of these things do we need to make? The place is pretty small. One of the things you notice now is nobody's using the cars. It's kind of nice. Now, somebody said, no, we have to get the economy back on track. We have to get growth going again so that we can afford to what? Afford to tackle the coronavirus. But no, we have to do exactly the opposite. Somehow the earth has to rebalance, which probably means that we'll just be forced so far back into our little clearings in the forests or our little cities that the earth will naturally retake at least 9/10 of what we took from it. Mm-hmm. And then we have a chance. Because, I mean, all the earth is really doing is what any large, complex living system does. It's defending itself. It's getting a temperature. It's doing some pretty weird stuff, and it's killing lots of stuff, and it hopes it gets out the far end. That's what your body does as well. So the earth is just the earth would rather get back to the way it was. Like something that's in dynamic equilibrium doesn't necessarily want to jump to a new state. It will if it has to. That will happen. But curiously, the opportunity presented here is for it to actually restabilize to a climatic and ecosystem stability that still has a niche for humans. How cool would that be? Because, as I say, before coronavirus, you know my position, that everybody kind of knows what they have to do. 7% reduction in emissions year on year on year. We've got 20 years to get these down to blah, blah, blah. There wasn't a snowball's chance in hell of that ever happening. And it didn't matter how many COPs we had. COPs on the beach, COPs in Glasgow, COPs in Madrid. It didn't matter. It was never going to happen. Bizarrely, the universe seems to be making it happen. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't like this. The toll of deaths ticking up, on the local news. It's heartbreaking. It is horrendous. It is, but there is no doubt that what was needed to be done, we would never have done. ever.
What we were just saying kind of made me remember the image of the monkey trap, where they put nuts in a bottle and the monkey goes in and grabs the nuts and then doesn't have the intelligence to let go of the nuts in the state of life.
Just can't open its fist. Just can't open its fist.
Yeah.
But in ways, if we get through this, in a bizarre way, I think it will mean we are profoundly changed.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't us. Whatever our notion of, anthropomorphic gods and so on and so forth, it will have to be different. Yeah, as I say, something I'd love you to share is Dr. John McDougall's wonderful video made about the 15th of March, on how people need to prepare and get ready for the, health-wise and what they need to store and how they need to eat for the crisis. And one of the things, he even has the courage to bring up speciesism, the bias against species. Like, who exactly do we think we are? Even our most progressive and intelligent people refer to the virus as the enemy. No, it's not. It's a cohabitant on this planet.
Yeah.
The vast majority of living systems on this planet, operate through what's technically called mutualism. So we understand evolution as being something that's always red in tooth and claw. There's predation, and there's parasitism. Everybody knows about those two. But the vast majority of things in the natural world work according to collaborative mutualism. Mm-hmm. They work together. The vast majority of cells in my body don't even have my DNA. My microbiome, there's far more things in here that don't have my DNA than does have my DNA. So what exactly am I? I co-evolved with this earth. So again, it's an aspect. I often think we should have called ourselves kind of, rather than wise men, handy men, because we're really good at making stuff. And to make stuff, you kind of reduce the problem to a very specific thing. And even science is like this. What is it in this particular plant that makes it good for you? And then we get the extracts and we take it in droplets. But of course, that's completely the wrong question. You evolved with those plants. They evolved with you. Science might be able to give you an interesting insight into, is that interesting that it does it this way? That we think this is the active ingredient. But we will never know more by aggregating all the individual pieces of knowledge than we do by simply apprehending the whole as it is. And the whole as it is we're part of this. And it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And now the part is taking us by the hand. We're going to be punished severely. But for the first time since we have spoken, I have the glimmer of a hope that our species might still be around in 20 years.
Mm.
That's new for me, as you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's called obligative mutualism. When I'm speaking about predation, parasitism, and mutualism, it's obligative mutualism, which is the one nobody has heard of, and it's what all of nature does. It collaborates. Obligative mutualism. That is the primary mechanism of all Darwinian fitting and evolution. Obligative mutualism. You find your little niche and you collaborate. Mm. You're part of the whole. As I say, we also identify parasitism and predation, and those are the ones we think this is the way nature works. Nonsense. Like I say, I personally think of myself as a meat uber. I carry around all these wonderful little microbiomes who need me. That's it. That's part of my job in life, is to keep these guys going.
Your job is to feed the biome that lives in your gut.
That's it. But I'm only kind of half joking. I'm in no way superior to these things.
The mitochondria were a foreign being to the single cell that they got into
Brilliant.
Obligative mutualism with, where if you take me inside of your cellular body, I will feed you energy if you will feed me. There it is.
Now that's kind of, and somehow we managed to reduce everything to the selfish gene and individuals out for their own outlook. I mean, you even stand in awe of I look at the medical people here, or the guys driving the buses, or the girls at the supermarket checkout. And they are mostly girls, to be fair. Like, they're turning up for work. They're seeing people going past every day who could have the virus. They're turning up for, the lowest paid jobs. Could somebody tell, right now, that girl in that supermarket who serves me every second day when I go in to get my greens and whatever and so on and so forth, she is a lot more valuable doing her job to me than any Nobel Prize winning economist, or fantasist of invisible hands or control.
Or even I'm just thinking how our society has it so backwards, where we pay our farmers and our teachers and the people who deliver the goods and services we need to survive, the lowest paid. And the people who figure out how to sell us more crap are the highest paid. What's wrong with it?
I love that. I was going to finish my story about the German car manufacturers. What I love about them,
Yeah.
I'm being mean to Germans. I mean, it's everybody, obviously, but you know, it says, how do we get more cars sold? Okay, we can move into China, and then they have this wonderful.
We can lie about our emissions.
You can't say that. Yeah, I know. But I mean, it's the same. I mean, you talk to Irish nutritionists; they're all educated in Ireland. Oh, meat and dairy have a hugely important part on the, on the nutrition pyramid. Well, yeah, if you want to die of cancer or cardiovascular problems or cancer, they do. But if you'd like to live a healthy life and not see a doctor till you're 60 or 70, I mean, maybe you should eat what human beings were designed to eat. But so I mean, it's not. Yes, I mean, the emissions cheating scandal was a fabulous piece of dishonesty, but this dishonesty is everywhere, and this is currently what we were incapable of escaping from, and suddenly. We didn't even escape from it. It just kind of disappeared. COVID just took it away from us. And it's not going to give it back to us. Which is, again, short-term thinking. And that's okay. People turn to me and say, well, John, you must be happy. All the emissions have gone down. What's happening currently in terms of the climate is the single biggest terror, I would say, that any independent climate scientist could have had, aside from when the Arctic ice goes. And that'll go this year.
The Blue Ocean event.
The Blue Ocean event will almost certainly occur this year, and that's the challenges this will lead to. Not immediately, but in the coming years, you're looking at easy and extra degrees temperature. But the other thing that's hugely frightening is the aerosol masking effect. So few enough people know that one of the great benefits of burning coal in particular, is that not only does it send out loads of CO2, which warms up the atmosphere, but at the same time it sends out loads of particulate waste, which keeps the atmosphere cool. It's like a little parasol, thousands and countless billions of little parasols which reflect the sunlight. We know from 9/11, I'm talking about the second one, when not Pinochet, I'm talking about the one in New York, not 1973 Pinochet, but when 9/11 happened and those aircraft were grounded over the United States, what we saw was a +6 and a +0.6 and a -0.5 swing in temperatures within 3 days. Just from the contrails. Now, it's difficult to know whether contrails are particulate waste from fossil fuel burning, and in particular, dirty coal, which is the bigger effect. But all the recent papers seem to indicate that we lose 30 to 40%, only that, of particulates in the air suddenly, and this will lead very, very quickly, almost instantaneously, to a 1 degree jump in temperature.
Yeah.
Just bang. Now. So this terrifies me at the moment, because even though China might be getting back on track, and they do a lot of the manufacturing, everywhere else is closing down. So bizarrely enough, although obviously climate obsessive, the last thing that I would be shutting down would be dirty coal plants. You stop the cars first, you stop the petrol first, you stop the diesel, you stop the methane, the natural, everything else, and then slowly start getting rid of that particular waste, which is essentially geoengineering us to a degree cooler than it would otherwise be, as well as. And the problem with that is losing it instantaneously. You get the heating effect almost instantaneously. Putting it up there, the full effect of CO2 emissions tends to take about 10 years. So in fact, this sudden drop in, of all things, dirty coal terrifies me. Europe was within 20 percentage points relative humidity and 1 degree of having a wet bulb event. Sorry, Brussels, as I said in Geneva a couple of years ago, whenever it was. 2 summers ago, we hit 41 with 40% relative humidity. I think you have that particular slide that I show all the time. It is very likely, therefore, that this summer, given that we'll have far less Arctic ice, we look definitely to have an El Nino, and this particular issue, it is very likely that even as far north as Brussels, we're going to have wet bulb events, maybe for days. And that will be tens of thousands of people dying in the streets, particularly the elderly and the infirm, because we don't have the air-conditioned facilities here. So one of the things I'm interested in doing is getting people to please, can we identify where there's air-conditioned facilities for late July, late August, so we can get people into these facilities, which doesn't really work too well with social isolation.
Let me clarify what you mean by wet bulb for people in the audience watching this who don't understand. You sent me a wonderful graphic
called the heat stress index chart. You've got Fahrenheit and centigrade temperatures down the left-hand column. And if we focus, say, on 90 degrees Fahrenheit, equivalent to a little bit over 32 centigrade, well, if your relative humidity is 25 or 30%, perhaps light showers, then you're in an area on the chart called mild stress. But if you move over just a little bit to 35% humidity, then you're in the area of severe stress. Let's move down to 100 degree Fahrenheit day, about 38 degrees C. And if you move over to 55% humidity, then you're in the area of very severe stress. And one more move, if you move down to 105-degree day, which is getting more common, a bit over 40 degrees centigrade, then you move into an area where they say you have dead cattle. Well, what about people out in the street?
So at a curiously low temperature, so your core temperature is in around 37, and the way your body keeps that cool is that your exterior is at about 36. So it can transfer, so the core, protecting the organs, can transfer heat to the exterior. And the way the exterior gets rid of it is it lets it evaporate in terms of sweat into the air. But if that air, even at only 36 degrees, I'm not sure what that is in weird American stuff, but even at that 36 degrees, where there's 100% relative humidity in the air, evaporation can't occur. What happens is the water just comes out and falls onto the ground. It takes no heat from the core.
Yeah, you sweat, you just drip sweat.
It just falls off you, but there's no cooling possible.
Doesn't evaporate.
And in the same way, if it's 40 degrees, you only need it to be about 60 or 70% relative humidity. And at that stage, you're cooking. Your internal organs cook. The fittest person in the world has 6 hours in those conditions.
Yeah, so all those allusions to frog in the pot are quite relevant.
Yeah, so, I mean, and again, it's a sort of a thing that, and this is the sort of thing that's interesting me now. You know, my admiration for, you know, the guys and girls in the checkout in the supermarket, the nurses going into work in spite of the fact that maybe they're the colocataires, you know, are scared to let them into the apartment. What it is we need to be doing in Brussels now, so that the old people's homes are not scenes of the most dreadful death and carnage come late July, August, if we hit wet bulb, which we will certainly hit in certain areas of Europe, but could easily, probably will hit in Northern Europe as well. So suddenly you're faced with these very practical, real problems. And that's okay. Can we do something about this? As somebody I can help, what can I do? Rather than worrying about how, I don't know, some strange new economic model is going to solve this.
No. Or am I getting the latest iPhone or something like that?
German car. I need a German car and an Irish steak.
I like to take my shot at Apple because I still have an iPhone 3 that
well
perfectly, except that I have managed to obsolete it by forcing all of the apps to new operating system. But it still works well, and it's, I think,
actually the Apple one is one of my favorite examples of why I think we would never have been capable of saving ourselves, and why, you know, our chances now brought about by this coronavirus. Because I remember writing a report years ago with a good friend, Colin Joyce, and it was called Consumer 2020. And we had this sudden revelation. Wow, you know, going forward. Yeah, I think we wrote this in 2010. And I can't remember. I think it was 2010. Maybe a bit earlier. But smart, like phones and smart stuff was out. And we suddenly realized, wow, you know, we can really reduce the material intensity of the economy. Because, I mean, like a phone now, it's just a little thing that looks like a skinny brick, right? So all you need to do is update the software. I mean, you don't need to use the material anymore. That is so brilliant. Did it make a damn bit of difference? No. People go and buy the latest iPhone. I can't tell one iPhone from the other. But the Apple acolytes, oh man, that's a 9C or a 10B or what? How do you know this shit? It's a little square of plastic, you know. So the notion that humans would have been in any way capable of sort of saying, wow, man, sorry, I will show mine. Wow, man, look, I bought this 20 years ago and I just keep upgrading the software and it's perfect. It's got to love it. I mean, it's ridiculous. The same with your washing machine, the same with your car, the same with anything. Of course, we could simply software update most of this stuff. Even if we didn't use software, good old Cubans managed to keep those 1940s and 50s cars going till today, I think. The same people who are sending doctors all over the world to help out. There's another way of doing this when you don't have a choice.
Well,
I guess Kennedy was Cuba's coronavirus in a kind of a curious way, and it's never gone away. And it never will go away. And maybe that's okay. Are the Cubans so badly off? Rather be in Cuba than in New York at the moment.
If we return to a regime of fixing rather than throwing away, repairing. So it's not just reduce, reuse, recycle, but it's repair, repurpose. I once went through the exercise of thinking of all of the words that fit with that, and I came up with a page full of them.
Fantastic. And I mean, isn't that a wonderful vision of an economy as well? Isn't that a wonderful vision of people working together? I mean, we've built all this shit. Okay, we can keep it. That's it, maybe. Let's keep it going. Let's grow our potatoes in the back garden. Let's start, if you need a car, well, we can car share. I mean, all of a sudden it's different. Like right now, you can feel the difference. People are helping one another. That old person over there, can they get to the supermarket? Let's just give them a call. And suddenly it's different. And we know that this is possible because we've seen experiments in alternative currencies in places like Japan and so on and so on. And it's different.
Let me add just a couple of items, and then we're going to have to close, unfortunately. But one of them is a quote that I wish I could remember where I got it. I didn't originate it. I wish I had. Scarcity of words leads to potency of words.
Nice.
Less is more. The other thing is one that I have at the signature file of my emails going out now, which was, kind of feels like the earth just sent us all to our rooms to think about what we've done.
I love that one. That is beautiful. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, and again, acknowledging the privileged position I'm in and how the stress that some people must be under. I say, if this goes on a while longer, I don't for 1 minute imagine that, the citizens of Europe are going to continue paying me this wonderful salary and let me sit here, doing what I'm doing with you. I mean, it'll change. So I'm not going to be comfortable forever either. But the silence, there's so many people admitting to, wow, it's okay, the silence. You wake up in the morning. What do I do? Got a lot of work to do. Yeah. Got some stuff to do with Stuart. That's nice too. But a lot of the time, it's, learning how to live with one another again. Like this, tomorrow when my daughter gets home from Honduras, there'll be 6 of us again in the house and 2 dogs, And wow, I mean, how do you wow, this is all so different. It's all beautiful. And one of the things, just to even take one more piece out, they say that the student learns something every day and the master forgets something. So just to take one more piece out of your beautiful thing about the efficiency of words when used sparingly. Rumi, that wonderful Sufi poet, he famously said that silence is closest to God. All else is poor translation.